Welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast, where we talk with the people behind the current events and breakthroughs in brain implants in an understandable way, helping bring together various fields involved in neuroprosthetics. Here is your host, Laden Yurachek.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast. Today's guest is Anuj Bhardwaj, and he is the CEO of SecondWave US, which is wearable ultrasound non-invasive therapy. And so Anuj, pleasure to have you on the show. Do you want to describe you and your technology a little bit better than I just did?
Absolutely, Layden. Thank you for inviting me to talk here in the Neural Implant Podcast. And thanks for the warm intro. Our company, as you said, is SecondWave Systems. We are building a wearable device that uses ultrasound to modulate nerve terminals and organs in the body using focused ultrasound on a non-invasive platform. Really excited to talk a bit more about our technology and our company right now and what we've done so far and what our goals are in the next couple of years.
Excellent. Yeah. And you, before we started recording, you said you spun out of a different company, and then you have some, we were talking about it before too, is you have some big names on the board and all this kind of stuff. So do you want to describe this a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. We spun out of a company that makes ultrasound equipment called the Ultran Group. Ultran was a recipient of a DARPA SBIR award. And when Ultran received the Phase 2 award, we decided to create a new company dedicated to the mission of that program, which is to build that wearable device for modulation in the body. And that's when we created SecondWave in 2019. As you said, we've got some amazing folks that joined this company and co-founded it with me. One of them is Professor Hubert Lim at the University of Minnesota. A lot of people know Hubert, and he's a leader in this area of treating inflammation, using ultrasound to modulate the spleen to treat chronic inflammation disorders. In addition to that, Hubert's got a pretty storied career in the academic field, working in the auditory cortex and in the neural space. It's great to have him. Our team, though, is very versatile. Other co-founders include Jeff Hyman, who brings 20 years of medical device experience to our company, and Kash Patel, who's our COO, who I've been working with for 11 years now, when we started Ultran and before we spun out at SecondWave. And then again, just a really great cast on our side. And we have fun in addition to the work that we're trying to do and our goal.
Cool. That's good. That's good to hear. I think work should be enjoyable, and you're spending a third of your life in doing this. So you might as well have fun and might as well enjoy it. So let's talk about the technology. Who's it for? What's the advantages, disadvantages, all this stuff?
Absolutely. What we're doing, as I mentioned before, is we're building this device. Our mission is to make it cost effective. It's non-invasive, and we can manufacture it at scale and create it in volumes that could allow for widespread adoption. So our intention is to do something a little bit different than what we see in traditional neurostim, which require invasive procedures to implant neural stimulators in the body. But because we can do this on a non-invasive wearable platform, we can reach a larger audience and actually try to treat a lot of patients that don't have other options, but also might be able to supplement the other medications and therapies that they're on, like drugs. Specifically, what we're doing is using it to, as I mentioned before, modulate the spleen to cause an effect that inhibits the body's release of inflammatory cytokines to reduce and calm down the body's immune system for people that have chronic inflammation disorders. So specifically, rheumatoid arthritis is where we are initially launching our device and performing clinical trials. And our goals are ultimately to get FDA approval and make an impact in that area. So the device that we made is called the SecondWave Mini. The Mini device is a phased array ultrasonic system that has 256 transducer elements on it and multi-channel beamforming technology that can focus deep within the body. So this is different than the ultrasound that we often look at, which is used for either diagnostic imaging or high intensity focused ultrasound for ablation, for cancer treatment. What we're trying to do is modulate, not cause a cavitation or ablation in the body, to create this modulatory effect to treat something episodic with an episodic treatment, not something that you would need in a surgery or not something that you would need in stimulation all day, every day. So that's why it's conducive to a wearable platform as well.
Okay. So question, I think 9 out of 10 people on the street wouldn't be able to answer this. What's the spleen? What does it do?
A great question. It's something that we like to talk about, the fact that we ourselves, a lot of us were confused about what a spleen is used for. But it turns out that it's an important organ in your immune system. And it creates a lot of helpful proteins and chemical effects in your body to fight off infections or like the type of inflammation that could be induced by viruses. For example, even in the cases of COVID-19, where we've done quite a bit of work as well to treat hyperinflammation. It's one of these organs that we don't tend to focus a lot of attention onto it, but it's, as I mentioned, it's important for its effect on the immune system. And it's also not a bad target for something where you're trying to focus ultrasound energy in the body. It's on the left side of everybody's body. It's the area we're trying to hit is between the 9th and 10th or the 10th and 11th ribs. And the depth at which we're trying to hit it varies from about 2 to 10 centimeters. So it's something we've studied a bit on the anatomical side, and we're learning a lot more about the location of it and the way it moves in the body so that we can track it and have targeted closed loop therapy. But that's my best answer. I think there's some other folks in our company that work really more closely on that biological side that could do better, but that's our goal. And that's, again, an important part of our.
So patients would not only have to know what the spleen is, but be able to find it as well. That sounds like an uphill battle. So would it be patients doing this, or would it be nurses, doctors, something like this? And then what does the device look like too? And then you talked a little bit about the effects, but what is maybe like, how fast does it act and all this kind of stuff?
Yeah, great question. So the product that we're working on, the technology we're developing right now, is for patients to use at home by themselves. So they'll be able to place it on their body. They'll be able to turn it on, administer therapy for themselves. What we've built so far and used in our first clinical trial was a device that's used by clinical professionals themselves. So doctors and nurses who are trained to use our device in the hospital. And the reason we did 2 reasons. One, as I mentioned before, we got funding from DARPA for our SBIR. That's how we spun our company out. We also got additional funding from both DARPA and Medical in the Defense Department to apply our technology towards treatment of COVID-19 induced hyperinflammation. So in the cases of extreme COVID, patients, their immune system, in an effort to try to protect the lungs from the virus, which is infiltrated, it actually overreacts and attacks the lungs. And so the similar effect that we're working on to treat chronic inflammation like RA could be potentially applied towards calming down that hyperinflammation caused by COVID. And so we were developing the technology and come pretty far along with it, primarily on the energy delivery side alone. And that was in like late 2019, early 2020. With the onset of the pandemic and the government's interest in doing this, we accelerated our device and got a version of it ready as fast as we could to be used in clinical trials to treat that COVID-19 induced hyperinflammation. And that was the one to be used at the hospital. It did not incorporate that diagnostic feedback loop. And we deployed that. We treated 100 patients, completed 2 clinical trials, one at University of Minnesota, one at UC San Diego. But now our focus is on our next generation device, which has a diagnostic component. It will still be administered to RA patients in an upcoming pilot clinical study by our trained employees of our company. But even that one will be used for placement, primarily in diagnosis. The next generation, which we're really excited about, and that technology development's underway, will have active targeting. So it will locate and track the spleen, and it will actively move our ultrasound beam during the duration of therapy. So that's the roadmap in a general sense. You asked a question about how a patient uses this. So the treatment, as I mentioned before, is episodic. It's going to be used once a day, and the duration of the therapy would be 18 minutes. So a patient would take our device, they'd use a disposable coupling solution, and we have really good industrial partners that work with us. One of them is 3M that make Class 1 medical devices, and they have really advanced coupling technology and hydrogel technology. So we're going to use a disposable component that a patient uses to adhere this and couple it to the body. And then for, again, that 18 minutes, they would administer therapy to themselves while they remain in a reasonably sedentary condition, maybe relaxing at home, reading, watching TV, and they would do that once a day.
Okay. Yeah, very cool. Hey guys, just a quick pause to talk about our show sponsor, Iris Biomedical. Iris Biomedical provides a portfolio of neural sensing and simulation platforms and components to accelerate early-stage medical device companies through preclinical and early feasibility studies. Iris is an ideal partner for companies with limited budgets or resources to invest in developing a new platform from the ground up. Their experienced engineering team, in-house cleanroom facilities, and ISO 13485 certified quality management system allow for prototyping and early-stage commercial production. Be sure to tell them you heard about it on the Neural Implant Podcast. That'll really help us out. Thanks. Now, back to the show. This sounds like a pretty good treatment, and most people have heard about neuromodulation and this kind of affecting the nervous system and potentially even the rheumatoid arthritis and everything like this. But what's the mechanism of action for ultrasound? You're not using electricity, but you're using ultrasound, which is something that's a little bit more rarely used. Why are you using this, and how does it work as well?
Yeah, great question. As we know, neurostimulators use electrical energy to modulate nerves and cause an action potential in nerves in the body. Ultrasound is different. And the reason we're using it, to answer that question first, is because we can deploy this on a non-invasive platform. So we don't need to have something implanted in the body or a needle that would be inserted like any transcutaneous nerve, or something like a transcutaneous nerve stimulator, which uses electrical energy, but has to get through the high impedance of the skin. So with ultrasound, we can focus deep within the body on that non-invasive platform. At SecondWave, we're able to do that on a wearable platform as well, which is a little bit different than some of the bulky ultrasound devices that we see in the world of HIFU, which is appropriate for surgical application. So that's why we use ultrasound. The mechanism is different though. What we're doing in our treatment is we're activating nerve terminals in the spleen. This causes a generation or an activation in the cholinergic pathway, which is something that was discovered and pioneered by Dr. Kevin Tracy, the Feinstein Institute. And the mechanism is that, and the research that we've done, but also our peers at GE, Feinstein, put a lot of headway into this to show that by activating those nerve terminals in the spleen, the splenic nerve connects up through the vagus nerve and sends a message up through the brain and then potentially back down again to cause an activation only in the spleen. And that's important because we want to limit off-target effects as well. There are a lot of therapies and there are other companies that are working on vagus nerve stimulation and with a similar effect to try to treat inflammation disorders. And while that may be very promising, there is some concern about off-target effects of stimulating the vagus nerve and what that might do to other parts in the body. We are focused, no pun intended, on stimulating those nerve terminals in the spleen and activating that effect in the cholinergic pathway for this mechanism.
Okay. Yeah, very cool. And so what kind of treatment would you guys be able to provide? Is this something that a patient would need to go to the doctor to be able to get a prescription? And how quickly would they be able to see effects? You mentioned basically once a day stimulation, or do you call it stimulation or what do you call it?
Yeah, therapy, stimulation. Yep.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. So how quickly would a patient see effects, and how, I don't know, much of a prescription is this, or could you go to CVS and pick this up and try it out?
Yeah, this will be prescribed by a rheumatologist. A patient who's potentially, there's a few different scenarios, but one could be a patient that's just been diagnosed with RA for the first time. They often are prescribed, the standard of care are drugs like Humira and Enbrel. Those biologics, a patient would be prescribed when they receive those biologics that they would take, though there is a lag time before they take effect. So often patients are on other medications, prednisone, which is a steroid, even methotrexate, which is also a chemotherapy. That period is an opportunity for us to also be prescribed as a complementary treatment to the biologics that they're going to start that do take time to have an effect, as well as some of the other things that are less desirable, like steroids, which have some side effects that are pretty extreme. Another potential scenario where a patient might use this is in the case where a lot of the standard of care just don't cause a response in patients. Up to 40% of them don't respond to the biologics at all. And this is a scenario where, okay, they're going to be on things, again, like prednisone, but our treatment could be something that complements that and gives them some relief from those steroids and other drugs that they have to take that just, again, have those undesirable side effects and aren't as effective as the standard of care biologics. Our vision generally is that we would be able to help patients suffer from RA that are on standard of care drugs, just alleviate the amount that they would need. Another huge issue right now is just the cost of treatment. The cost of the healthcare system is often between $100,000 to $200,000 per year for patients that take biologics like Enbrel. So that's a huge burden on the system. In addition, and a lot of the rheumatologists and even patients we talk to, they have lapses in coverage due to the fact that their insurance companies need to improve these biologics, which again costs the insurance companies a lot of money. So we have a family member of one of our employees this family member has RA and she had a lapse in coverage for her drug for 3 months as we switched healthcares from one provider to another. It had to be reapproved, and that took a lot of time. One of the KOLs we work very closely with has told us stories about how he has to get on the phone routinely with insurance companies to get his patients unrejected from those biologics that he prescribes for them. We really want to provide a solution that patients can use that can reduce the burden on the cost of the healthcare system, as well as supplement them and allow them to avoid taking drugs with side effects that are unwanted, but also help out when they're unable or not responsive to those standard of care biologics.
So what fraction of the $100,000, $200,000 a year cost would you guys represent?
Great question. Let me answer that a little bit differently. We can manufacture this device for a reasonable cost. We're still working out some of the economics on what we would launch with, but the cost of our device would be on the order of maybe $3,000, we think, when we launch. It's not going to be very high, and that device will last for 6 to 12 months. There is a consumable that would be part of this as well, but you can see right off the bat that these costs are not very high by comparison to the ones that the drug companies are using. Of course, there's other costs in the system. There's distribution, there's the effort it takes to launch this device and the clinical trials we have to run. But in a general sense, at steady state, we definitely can bring these costs down quite a lot.
Yeah, interesting. And I think because it's a wearable, it's not class 3 implantable or something like this, the FDA regulation, the approval and everything might be a lot easier. Do you want to talk a little bit about this and your route to regulatory approval?
Yeah, good question. So as I mentioned before, we're about to kick off our RA pilot study. We've done work in COVID. Our RA pilot will give us data that we need to help us hone in on a therapy and what provides the best efficacy for the solution that we're going to ultimately commercialize and the device that we're going to build for our pivotal clinical trial. So as I just mentioned, we'll do a pivotal. We expect that to begin in 2023 and run for about 12 months. The results of that would be used for FDA clearance along the de novo pathway. Because this is a new therapy, it hasn't been done before, we can't go via 510K, but our feeling is because it is safe to use and it's non-invasive, we could use de novo, and that allows us to, again, get non-invasive device through a little bit easier than with the traditional PMA pathway. One of the reasons we think that is because for our COVID-19 trials that we did have interaction with FDA for the potential of getting emergency use authorization. In our pre-sub meetings, we applied for and received a designation for non-significant risk. So we got that NSR designation in COVID, and we believe that we can use that or receive that again for our work in RA. And again, that enables that de novo pathway, which is a relatively new way for new devices and novel therapies that are non-invasive to get FDA approval.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I think it'll blow a lot of people's minds that you could put this device on almost like a sticker or something like this and be able to cure a lot of these kinds of diseases, arthritis and everything like this, COVID and all this. Yeah. So you mentioned that you had won some grants, both you and your parent company. Do you want to talk about this process a little bit? Maybe give some tips for other potential startups in the neuromodulation space. What was good, what worked, what didn't? And I haven't heard anything about venture capital and outside investing so far. So you guys are staying with a non-dilutive kind of thing so far?
Yeah, good question. So as mentioned, all of our funding to date has been from the government, the Defense Department specifically. Again, started with the DARPA SBIR award, first the phase 1 in 2018 and then the phase 2 in 19. At which point we spun out SecondWave officially. We got additional funding. The pandemic, one of the effects of the pandemic was that the government was very interested in trying to reduce the death rate and find other treatments in addition to the drugs and the vaccines that were under development. So we received additional DoD awards from Biomedical to perform those clinical trials, again, with the intention of getting emergency use authorization. And so to date, we've received almost $11 million in total federal contracts. We've been very fortunate that the money that we've received, and we've spent just a little over half of that so far, has been directly applicable to our mission in the first place. It's worked out really well for us to partner up with DARPA and CBIR to develop our device and our therapy. The reason that this SBIR and solicitation went out from DARPA in 2018 was from a program that DARPA began called Electrics, where the mission of Electric to understand the inflammatory pathway in the body, map it, and then spawn potential therapies to treat inflammation using devices, using bioelectric medicine. And that's what led to our SBIR. The problem that DARPA realized early on was that while ultrasound is a very promising technology, there aren't wearable devices, there aren't devices that can be obtained at lower cost. Everything out there that uses ultrasound for energy delivery is expensive, it's bulky, it's often used again for HIFU, for ablation, for surgical applications. While there are a few wearables, they don't use the type of mechanisms that we use, which allow for sophisticated beam forming deep in the body. They may use single element transducers instead of something that could actually focus energy. So they put out an SBIR for a wearable device that uses advanced ultrasound technology for modulation. And that was perfect because it's something that we had been working on anyway. I think that my advice to other companies like us would be to look at, again, the SBIR program. We're very strong advocates of it. It's really been the main engine that launched us. I'd advise to look at NIH, BARDA, these groups that have solicitations, sometimes specific, sometimes more general, and then consider if they fit within the mission of what a company is doing and apply. And again, we were very lucky to be able to do that. I think a lot of people could have that opportunity as well. That being said, you asked about venture capital. We've not raised dilutive investment from venture yet, but we are actually in an active fundraising round. In addition to the contracts we're executing against, we want to accelerate further the development of that pivotal device that uses that closed loop active targeting. And we want to do some additional research to better determine and finalize our clinical protocol. And so we are interested in venture as well. I wouldn't say that non-dilutive alone is really the only thing that's interesting to us. So we're in an active fundraising round right now, looking to raise about $4.5 million to last us this 18-month period to accomplish that development that we need to and finalize our clinical protocol so we can launch our pivotal.
Yeah, it's very exciting stuff. And I wish you the best of luck with that. And I know fundraising can be very difficult. And it's very much like all encompassing for many months while you're doing it. And that's basically the CEO's job, is to give PowerPoint presentations.
It's a lot of work. Yes, I do that. I do that quite a bit. In fact, I'll be doing it more this week as well. But it's good for us to get our message out there. In talking to investors, we get the chance to talk to a lot of other great people that we can collaborate with. And we've met a lot of great people along the way. So we welcome that opportunity to talk to anybody, investors, researchers in this field, and other experts in our area.
Yeah, very cool. What is one of the biggest challenges in this work that you're doing in the company?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges we have is whenever doing something new like this, a new therapy, a new modality, there's a lot of effort that has to happen up front to be able to not necessarily change the paradigm of our field and of the treatment which is commonly used, but provide the evidence that's needed, run clinical trials, which are expensive to do, at the same time as completing product development within the proper quality management systems, which we are implementing as well. Bringing all of that together at the same time while trying to get the appropriate amount of money to do it's a lot of work. It's very rewarding as we hit our milestones along the way, but it's definitely not for the faint of heart to run a medtech startup, but by comparison to some other companies that would be easier to get off. But I think that what make us unique, definitely allow us to be high performing, is our versatile team, that we bring people that have this strong background in technology, but we also have folks that have a lot of really relevant direct clinical experience, running clinical trials, running research, all members of our team, in addition to the other folks that we've brought on that really relevant and strong experience in quality management systems, as well as on the administrative side. So all that together, I think we've been very fortunate to get to this point, and we've been very fortunate to get funding and support from organizations at DoD.
Yeah, $11 million. That's nothing to sneeze at. And that's essentially winning the lottery. People have won less and been excited about that. Yeah, so it's very exciting. It's great that these kind of things exist and that you're able to use it to be able to build something that's useful for everybody. And yeah, all this. So yeah, Anuj, this has been really interesting. I found this very enlightening, especially the convergence of new technologies and business. And you guys have seemed very competent and successful in growing this in only the last essentially 3 years. I commend you for that. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to mention?
I don't think so, Lane. I really appreciate, again, this chance to talk here. And again, if you ever want to chat more or learn more about this, I look forward to further interaction. And again, we're looking forward to the work that we've got upcoming here. And we were excited to be able to do this and execute on our goals. Thanks again.
Are you looking for talent? Are you looking for people to join, or are you looking for anything in particular?
For sure. We're always looking for talent in this area. It's a competitive space to hire good talent. We've been very fortunate to get this far already, but we're always looking for great people to work with us. Yeah, for sure. And great people to collaborate with.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
Hope you enjoyed the show and were able to learn something new, bringing together different fields in novel ways. Until next time on the Neural Implant Podcast.